Welcome back to another wondrous episode of our podcast. We are so excited. It's weird. We're so excited to talk about this topic, even though it has a lot of trauma that stems from it. But it's okay because that's what happens when you're that deep into your path of healing, like talking about the things that happen to you, the people in your life who maybe stored some of that conditioning. It begins to feel like you're not the victim anymore, so it becomes easier to talk about what happened. So as weird as it sounds, we are super excited to talk about mommy and daddy issues this episode. We're going to be bringing in some of the insights that we've found using both of our modalities of soul contracts, as well as human design and gene keys, and really just talking about how we noticed the conditioning in our parents, how that showed up in our life, and the things that we are now healing from and passing insights on to you so that you can heal too, because that's what we're here to do. We're here to heal and grow together.
So let's have fun with this episode.
I know, right?
It's so funny because I'm sitting here thinking I did not write anything down for this episode whatsoever. I'm just like, okay, whatever comes out, mom and dad, forgive me.
Right? Yeah.
Awesome. So do you want to start or do you want me to start?
Yeah, I can start just because I feel like I really like, of course, now that I know my dad, there's some stuff there, but most of my stuff is my mom. Like you had two parents to to kind of impact there. So there's a lot to unpack, I'm sure. Yeah, so in the introduction episode, where we talked about our stories, I said that my mom had undiagnosed borderline personality disorder. And last episode, we talked about mental health issues. And it was one of those things where you said, like, there's a whole book, the DSM, with all these diagnoses. And even though my mom never got diagnosed as, right, undiagnosed borderline personality, I've been on a healing journey that's included many therapists. And I like to say, if 3 out of 4 therapists agree that someone is a diagnosis, then it's probably true. And so um this is crazy because I recently got a chance to pull my mom's human design chart. And it was one of those situations where my mom and we're technically, I guess, estranged right now. Well, she's estranged from the family because we didn't cut her out. She just kind of left. So it was one of those things where I thought a lot. And that's one of the things I love about human design. I thought a lot of things and I felt a lot of things about how I grew up. But when I saw her chart, it was like it almost reshaped kind of the dynamic. Like when I looked, so for context, I looked up her chart. She's actually a 5-1 and she's a manifesting generator. And
Oh, oh my gosh, that's funny.
it is, because I was like, she's a 5-1. And it was one of those things where it makes you think about the perspective. It was like, did she know a bunch of stuff? Did I remember that being a thing? Like that she knew a bunch of stuff, like that she liked to research.
Yeah.
And then seeing that she had an open solar plexus, well, not completely open, undefined solar plexus. I'm an emotional authority. Like I experience my life in waves of up and down. And so it was another instance of like, was I the emotional one the whole time? Like, was I like, it even like makes you kind of think back to your memories of like, did my emotions cloud the situation and make it that dark of a cloud? Like, was it me? And it was just one of those things Like there were so many insights, but here's the one that just really took hold of me. So I mentioned in my story that I was taken away from my mom's care due to child abuse and neglect. And so it was one of those situations where they wanted reunification is always the goal. It's always the goal when you're removed from a home. And so it kind of just seemed like that wasn't her goal. Like she just kind of was like, okay, like you don't want to be here. You told people what I did to you. Like, that's cool. And it wasn't until my grandmother died in, I think it was 2019. I'm not gonna belabor the year because I'm like, it happened. I could look at a date at some point, but it was so bad to the point where, so for context, my aunt is 80. My mom is like 50 something. Same mom, different dad. And who their dynamic has always been interesting. And it was cool to look at their charts together and to see some of the reasons why they like butt heads a lot. But
Right.
that's right. And
Right.
so my aunt, being the older one, obviously had, you know, that foundational relationship with, you know, my grandmother that my mom didn't have. And I think my mom was always kind of jealous of that. So when my aunt, she was the person who's set to take care of the arrangements, we met at the funeral home, and the invitation was extended to my mom. And our strangeness was such that we weren't even sure that my mom was going to show up to plan her mother's funeral. Like that is how like gone that she was. So when she showed up, it was like, oh snap, you showed up. Like it's been some years.
Right. Oh, wow.
Like you care. That's cool. And so it was a very like rocky kind of situation, but it was one, and I have to note this, it was one where because I had been away from her influence for so long, the way that I was scared of her when I was young, I wasn't scared anymore. Like I felt the full freedom. Not to mention at this point, I had a two-year-old, 3-year-old. So, so I was a grown woman in my own right.
Yeah, adulting.
Right. And so it was one of those things where like because I wasn't scared of her anymore, I was open to reestablishing a relationship with her and really seeing like if you showed up today, then maybe you changed. Maybe there's hope.
Right.
And inevitably my mom showed us who she was. And it was one of those things where so for context, people who have borderline personality disorder, they're very quick to react. They're very quick to like act in anger, this very like victim mentality, like you did this to me, so I'm gonna make you pay kind of situation.
Yeah.
And my aunt and my mom have always had this relationship, and it's not on my aunt's side. My aunt is probably the most like giving, loving person that I know. And so it always baffled me why they never got along, because I'm like, why are you tripping? But you know, and so when she came back into our lives, she showed us little signs that like she hadn't changed. But the kicker was when 2 years ago, my aunt had an electrical fire in her apartment. She was at work, thank goodness. But and she lived right around the corner from me. So someone called me and they were like, hey, I think your aunt's apartment has smoke. So I went over, I go, it was a full blown fire. My aunt had a dog. She pretty much lost everything in terms of her clothes. She lost the dog, unfortunately, due to smoke inhalation. And my aunt didn't have anywhere to go. So obviously, I was like, at one point when I was removed from my mom, my aunt actually took me in, they call it kinship care. Like she got certified, she took parenting classes, it was a whole thing. So of course, you don't have anywhere to stay, you're staying with me. Like it's not even a question at all. And when that happened, the fire happened, my mom and my aunt, they were, separated. So I was like, someone's got to tell my mom that her sister has just suffered a great loss.
Right.
And I call my mom and I tell her what happened. And she was just so cold. And so I ignored it. And I was just like, can you just call her, just to like let her know that you're here, that you care, kind of deal. And my mom just kind of like scuffed and laughed audibly on the phone and was like, okay. And then proceeded to take an entire day to actually make said phone call.
Oh, wow.
And it was one of those things where, okay, I was willing to like, get through the things that happened when I grew up. Okay. You came back into the fold. You showed us who you were. Like, okay, like nothing life-threatening happened. You just kind of chose to go your own way. But this I cannot stand for, essentially, because I'm like, this woman, like, basically helped raise you. Because again, my grandmother was like 40 something. My aunt was 25. My grandmother was like 40 something. They didn't want to leave the house. So my aunt would like help out and things. And so to know the dynamics of that relationship, it was one of those things where like, I just don't understand it. And I'm not going to rack my brain trying to understand it because it's just one of those things like, I've said it a bunch of times, I'm an emotional, like I have feelings, like I can't just do that. Like I care about people too much to just be that cold. Like I can't do that.
Right.
And so when I looked at her chart, specifically in her gene keys, it really started getting me fascinated with wounds. And so her genetic wound is the wound of repression. And apparently it is the most ancient and primal of the traumas. And this person fears repression and control. They attract people who either repress them or they in turn, because of this like fear, start to repress other people. And when I read that, I was like, oh my gosh, like this is my childhood. Like, what is happening? And so it says in the defensive reaction of the wound in a repressive form, it's a desire to go into one's shell, to leave, to hide. She wasn't in the repressive. In the reactive form, it is a readiness to be aggressive towards someone who's trying to morally repress you. And so it said that the way of healing this wound is through honesty and sincerity. I kind of gave up hope a little bit when I read that because my mother is the most secretive, like, not like, I was like, oh, that's, hopefully we get through there. And then each wound has an emotional reaction to the manifestation of the wound. And hers is aloofness.
Oh.
And when I read that, I was like, this explains so much. And it was one of those things where, and this is why I love these tools that we work with, because it gives you an understanding that the person can't give you. It helps you develop empathy because it wasn't that it made what she did okay.
Right.
It was just an understanding of, oh, you were just living in your shadows and no one was there to show you how to be a different way. And so when we're talking about mom and dad issues during this episode, I'm really curious to see where we're going to go because I'm like, unpacking wounds in like the first 15 minutes.
I want to tag on to something with that though, because when I want our listeners to understand that where Diamond and I are in our process is probably down the road quite a bit from where many of our listeners are going to be listening, because most of you are still in the very angry, grief space of this. You're grieving the fact that your parents did something, or you're angry that your parents did something, or you're maybe in the disassociation that it's not reality. Like I always think of the grief process when I think of mommy and daddy issues, because oftentimes we know things happen, but we don't want to recognize that they happen, because these are people that we love and trusted. And so we're going through this process. So wherever you are in the process is where you're supposed to be. So I want to honor that. So don't take necessarily what Diamond and I say where we're at in our understanding, because we've been working with these tools for years. So our understanding, when we look at certain things and certain aspects of the tools that we use, our mindset is already one that goes, okay, I can have empathy. That was a great word to use. I can have empathy for that. We can have empathy for a lot of things and still not like them. So, like in my case, I'm at the place where I honor the fact of my parents' shortcomings. And I honor the fact that they didn't have tools. So I have boomer parents. All right. So all you Gen Zers are going to go, oh, boomers. Yes, they are assholes at times, but they're sometimes the most under-resourced generation emotionally that we've ever had. And so if we can step back as humans and go, this soul, and this is what I had to eventually do with my mom, especially. I mean, we all have wounds for both of them, but when I started to understand, kind of like you with your mom, like you saw these things in her chart and you're like, okay, this is why she does what she does. And so I can have empathy for that. But then we also take a step back and go, our parents didn't have these tools. They didn't even have like Myers-Briggs. Like if you want to get like really superficially, with it, like they didn't even have those types of tools to go, okay, am I an introvert or am I an extrovert? Or am I emotional or am I feeling? Or if I'm, they didn't have tools. My grandparents did not have tools to understand who they were designed to be. That wasn't in the cards for them. So to expect a human who has no tools to be able to understand a person who does have tools or is learning through this process, and for them to be okay with it, you're asking for something that's impossible. My parents could not understand when I left the church and I was searching for my own path and I was using tools and I was talking about things that they didn't even believe in, didn't even think existed. I mean, we're talking like things beyond just angels and demons. Like they could get that concept because that's scriptural. But when you go beyond that and you're talking about 4D, 5D, 12, you're talking about chakras and all that kind of stuff, they were completely at a loss. And when I was angry, I blamed them for it because they didn't know. But then now that I'm on the part of the journey that I'm on, I have to realize they don't know. They really don't. They had no tools. There was no tools in school. There was no tools. So I want our listeners to really think about, because I think in our society right now, we have a culture of people just disassociating with family members, and sometimes rightly so. So don't come at me in the comments, but sometimes rightly so. If you're abused like you were and you were removed, that's great. The reconciliation, there's a whole process with that. And if it was done, that was amazing and it worked out fine, great. Most of the time it doesn't, unfortunately, just doesn't. We know that statistically. But if we're trying to expect adults who don't have any comprehension of their emotional equipment, their EQ is very minimal. That's what most of them are. Then to expect them to understand that and not have empathy for them, we're doing them a disservice because we're the people that understand. And now we have to help them. And I want our listeners to really understand that, even though at times we may not have conversations or relationships with people or family members or moms or dads, that's times that we're okay. But we as a soul, as a child of a parent, I'm a parent, you're a parent, our children are here for a reason. And so I still have a purpose for my parents, and it is not always nice. because I'm the catalyst that makes them think outside of the box. And now they don't always, I mean, like sometimes they're like, stop, we can't handle any more of what you're talking about. And I have to back off because I have to think they don't know what they don't know. But it's my job, even when it's not fun, to be that catalyst. So I kind of wanted to put that in there. Like, I think sometimes when we're going through our trauma, we want to blame everybody. And we have to realize that this is, like grief. There are some things that we're going to have to process through. And we have to, when we come out on the other side, we have to look at things very differently because they don't have those tools. And your mom and my parents are pretty much the same age. They don't have those tools.
Yeah.
They don't know what to do with them. They wouldn't even know what to do with them if we gave them to them. That's the problem. Like, they're not going to do anything with them because most of them are not designed to wake up. They're not, sadly, but they're not.
Yeah.
Sorry for our listeners if you're in that age demographic and I offended you, but it's just so there we go. So do you want to share any more about your mom or your dad, especially?
The only thing I want to share about my dad is just that he's a projector. And that is something that's interesting for me to see, even how his conditioning shows up now that I know him. Like he it's crazy, actually. They both are no. My mom is not emotional. He's emotional. His conditioning has been such that he had to suppress his emotions his whole life, growing up with older brothers who picked on weakness, being in the contracting for the government, and then working in IT. Like, you can't have emotions. You have to be very like logical in those things. But even just like now building a relationship with him, like as a projector, I know that he likes genuine words of affirmation. So like when we go on trips, like it helps to have that base. But most of my trauma is from my mom. So I think I'm complete.
For women, I think most of us do have trauma from our moms.
Yeah.
And for me, like, I have a good relationship with my mom now, and it wasn't always easy to get there. And there are still times where she and I, like, she came and visited a few weeks ago, and when she left, I was like, yeah, you need to go home. I love you, but you need to go home, because she was in an energetic space that just wasn't jiving with me. And it had nothing to do, it wasn't bad, but it was just like she was energetically in a space that density I don't do well with on a long-term basis. And if she probably would have been like staying, in her RV somewhere, I could have handled it. But I think energetically for her, I was also problematic. She just doesn't understand it in that manner. Because I know my children energetically don't always jive with her. And that's fine, because they came here for me, not her. But and I'm here for them, not, she's supposed to be grandma. And so for me, like with her, what I found out, and this is what I really wanted to touch on, is the generational aspects of things, because I was very lucky until I was actually 41 when I lost my last grandparent in their 90s. And so I lived most of my life with 3 of my grandparents, both sets of my parents, and all of my aunts and uncles are still alive, or at the time, a couple of them have passed now, but at 40, when I started really, 37 is when I really kind of hit all this stuff. But that time period, I still had multiple generations in my family, and I didn't understand generational trauma like I do now. But what I began to understand is that the more I dealt with my issues with my mom, I realized that a lot of things that I thought were mommy issues weren't really mommy issues. They were other people's issues. My mom just happened to be in the arena or in the space that those other people were at the same time. So I associated them with her because I already had this kind of like animosity in a way towards her about certain things, And so like I realized in my journey that some of the things that I thought she caused, unknowingly, she wasn't even she wasn't the instigator of that. She wasn't the one that said it the first time. Like, there was a saying that I had for years in my head, and I thought it was her. And then I realized after peeling back some onion layers, it wasn't even her, it was my grandmother. And like, that shot my whole world out of it, because I had epitomized my grandmother. And I thought she was a wonderful woman. But there were certain things that I just thought was my mom, and it wasn't her. It was, other situations. And my mom just kind of went along with it. And so that's why, I guess, in my own mind, I thought it was her, and it really wasn't. But when I started, like, as an adult, and I started looking at our family history, and I started working in some ancestral wounds and things like that, I realized, like, the magnitude of the generational trauma that my family had endured. And most of it has to deal with women, very like energetically powerful. That's what I'm going to say. They weren't necessarily powerful in status or, that type of thing, but energetically, they were very powerful women. And because of religion, they became very submissive in that respect, and it wasn't in alignment, and so it caused lots of conflict. And all we know throughout history with religion, that there are many tumultuous times, especially with women who are energetically different, that we were burnt and all kinds of stuff throughout history. So there was all of these things in my history that started popping up, and stories of things that, because I was an adult now, I could ask, like, certain things, because I would pick up on stuff in family reunions or stuff I'd heard in childhood, and I'd be like, wait a second, is so and so this, because I could see from a different perspective than my childhood why my mother did certain things. So, like, there was an individual, it was a man that we came in contact oftentimes when I was growing up, and my mother, when we went to this individual's house, she was like, don't go to the bathroom by yourself. And I could never figure out why. I never had a problem with the dude, didn't have a problem with his wife or whatever, but I found out that he had abused some family members. And so now I understood why she had that reaction. But growing up as a kid, I'm like, why are you so, like, crazy, like, ridiculously, like, it was this whole pomp and circumstance to go there. But I was like, why did you take us? Like, now as I'm done, I'm like, why did you even take us there? Why? But because of her religion and her respect for her elders and all these, she felt obligated to do certain things, out of respect. But it was so traumatizing to her to do it over and over and over again. And I was like, what? So now as an adult, I see, like, those patterns. Like, growing up, I didn't know that my grandmother had tried to commit suicide, and that my mother was she was in the same space that this was happening. Like, so when you start unpacking as an adult with your adult parents, and if they're willing and open, sometimes you'll find out things and you go, that is why they acted the way they did. Like, I could never figure out, like, why my mother didn't like blood. But if you saw your mother try to commit suicide and there was blood everywhere, yeah, you'd have a problem with blood. Like, simple things like that just, we don't realize now as a parent who I have a grown child and I have two smaller children. When I talk to my grown daughter and she says certain things from her perspective, I have to honor that, because that is her perspective, even though it's not necessarily, I can give my perspective on why I chose to do something a certain way, but how she felt about it at the time, I have to honor that as well, because that was her experience. And so being able to see the generations of things that come to play, then I look at it in my life, like, why do I do certain things? Like, why do I have certain behaviors, or maybe why do I have certain mannerisms, or why do certain things bother me that I don't understand that bother me? I realized a lot of that I held because of things that happened to my mom, my grandma, my great grandma, my great grandma. Like, we're talking, I've gone back about 13 to 14 generations of sexual traumas, religious traumas, torture, major childbirth things, constant childbirth things, and just suppression of the feminine, not being a woman, but the feminine aspect of womanhood. And when you are able to see, and when you're initially starting this, I'm going to tell you, you're not going to see any of this the way you see it. You're going to be pissed. You're going to be angry at your mom, and rightly so. You have to grieve that process, like, because the person that's supposed to do certain things for you and nurture you, even if it seems like that's what they're doing, many times there are certain things that we do that we're not doing that. You know, like, I know, because I'm not a hugger. I didn't hug my daughter enough growing up. I didn't. My husband and her hugged all the time. I didn't do it. Now, as a mom has an adult child, I hug her every time I get a chance, because I know I didn't do that. And it's my responsibility now to do that. It's not her responsibility to instigate that. That's my responsibility. And so, looking at it from that perspective, I think that when we look at mommy and daddy issues, once we can get through that pain and that anger and that bitterness and get to that place of empathy, we can step back sometimes and go, that's why our parents did those things. That's why they did that. And for the majority of people, not everybody, so don't put that. I don't know that a lot of those parents, especially in that generation, I don't think a lot of them understood the things that we needed as children. And they didn't understand because they didn't have tools. So you can't expect somebody to do something. You can't expect a mother not to have an explosive behavioral problem, like throwing things, hitting you, those types of things. And then the next moment, they don't even remember it happened, but you do. And to this day, they still don't remember that those incidences happened, but you and your sibling do remember them happening. They're correct, but you're also correct. Because their mental illness or their circumstances at the time that it happened, most of them just disassociated, so they don't remember. And not every parent, I think, wants to hurt their children. We just don't have the tools how to treat ourselves personally. Like, my mom took care of herself terribly. Like, she always was dressed up and did the things she was supposed, but self-care was not a priority for her. So why should she worry about that with her daughters? Like, we should be prim and proper, and we should dress up to go to church, and we should be the good little girls that don't cause anybody else to sin. You know, like, we did all of those things that were in the box, but it was the things that were outside of the box that she didn't know how to do. And to blame her when I was grieving, yeah, I blamed her a lot. And I told her to her face that I was angry and mad and bitter. And I didn't talk to her for a while because I couldn't emotionally handle that. But then I realized I have a responsibility in this as well. And so I want our listeners to honor where they're at in this process, because dealing with mommy and daddy issues is the hardest thing you're ever going to do in your life. But if you realize that, like, when I ran my mom's chart with my dad, and I have one sibling, and I ran the four of us together, and I had never understood how much trauma that my mother carried, but I could see that in her chart. Like, it was massively overloaded with trauma numbers, and especially with their placement. But then when I saw my dad's chart and my sibling and I's chart compared to hers and together, I realized why our souls all chose to be together. Because where my dad could help her, my sibling and I could not. Where my sibling triggered her, I was the counter for that. Where I triggered my mother, my sister was the counter for that. So my mom always had somebody to help stabilize her. She just didn't know how to use it. She did not know how to use us effectively as those tools. And so to her, we were, at times we were irritants. We were, we triggered her so much because she didn't have the tools to know what to do with them. And so now as a parent, I look at my own kids and my like their chart, because with what I do, I can run a family's chart and I can look at how they work dynamically together, just like human design does. But I can see like one of my children is a trigger for me, but one of my other children is kind of that grounding force for me. So when I'm triggered by the one kid, I honestly have to go, why am I triggered by this child? And I have to take a step back. But then I also sometimes will go find comfort in the other child, in sometimes just laughing with him or sharing a TikTok video back and forth. Like that's the comfort that I need to know, okay, I am being a good parent, even though this child triggered me. You know what I'm saying? Or maybe I didn't do that right, because that's the child that will call my bluff on everything. He will call my mask every time. And it makes me mad. I'm being honest. He does. He will rip my mask off faster than anybody in my family. And I'm like, I love you for it, but I don't like you right now. And I tell him that all the time. I'm like, I don't like you right now. So we're gonna have to like stay. And we've had this discourse and this conversation. Like, and he's like, well, Mom, that's what you said. And I'm like, yeah, it is what I said. You know, like, and it's, we have to have this continuous conversation, but I want to be the best parent I can be for him. But I have to know that he's my trigger and I have to honor him for that. So that's the, I think for, you know, the conversation, I didn't know where this conversation was going either. So whatever I just said, I don't really remember any of it. So that tells you that it was not me, but it's one of those things that I think it's a very interesting conversation to be had about where we are in the process, because I know most of our listeners are really angry right now at their parents.
Yeah. I agree with you on a couple of points. Like one with a lot of our listeners are in that angry phase. I pulled a chart of a projector. She's a splenic projector, and she had so much openness in her chart. And unfortunately, due to listening to what society deemed was worthy, like making money and things, she went against her gut instinct and it landed her in jail. And so one of the first, I love one of my channels. I have the 59-6, which is like the gift of intimacy. So, which is the gift of intimacy. So,
It's your 12-3 on your chart, by the way, on mine.
oh yeah. I love that.
Intimacy number.
I love that. But I have this ability to, like, you know, in a very short period of time, people tell me like about their lives because there's just that comfortability piece. And so one of the questions that I asked her when right, you can feel the vibe. When I felt
Right.
that the vibe was okay, I was like, can I ask you, like, before you did whatever you did, I don't need to know what it was, but before you did whatever you did your gut tell you, no, like, don't do this? And then that's when we started unpacking. And so at some point, I forget how this came up. I think she was just saying something about her mom. And I was like, do you know your mom's time of birth? Right. And it's like always my thing. Do you know your time of birth? Because that's the only thing that really is like the make or break. Like
Right.
birthdays. Yeah. So she did. And we looked at her mom's chart, and her mom had a lot of definition in the head and the crown. And so a lot of the beliefs, you know, because the mom had hopes and dreams, but grew up where her mom told her, you have to get a job, you have to do this, you have to do that. And so she then, you know, took these on and dimmed her own light. And so that dimming of the light showed up in the childhood. And so I love, this was the second thing that I agreed with you. Well, first she was well, let me wrap this projector thing up, but she was angry. Like I had just learned about my mom's, right? And this is exactly what you're saying. I had just learned about my mom's wounds. And so I was like, do you want to look at her wounds? Like, do you want to
Yeah.
look at her wounds? And so we looked, and she was like, that makes sense, right? It makes sense. But the empathy doesn't come until you've gone through, like you said, that grieving, like kind of all the anger, the denial, the this, the that, the acceptance piece, and then you can come into empathy. And so when you talk about, like, you didn't give your daughter enough hugs growing up, so you're doing everything you can now, and to know that your son is a trigger for you, like, so I say things like, we choose our parents, because I think I heard that somewhere. And, you know, like, to know that Taylor chose me and Dre, like, it's one of those things where when I looked at her chart for the first time, even just the energy being different, like, me and her dad are both generators. She's a manifesting generator. Me and her dad have an open heart center, and she has a very defined heart center, a lot of willpower in that child. And so it makes you, especially as you're on this path, it makes you kind of, like you said, it's a trigger. Like, one of the things that, you know, in all her beautiful innocence at 7, she just thinks that, you know, she'll have an idea and, like, it's supposed to happen. Like, just manifest it, right? Like, and it's one of those things where my genetic wound is a wound of denial. And so my way of healing is through relaxation and ease. And one of the practical guidelines they give you for kind of like working with this wound is, when you find yourself getting angry, really look at the reason why you're angry. And when I started doing that, it really showed me some of the triggers and some of the deeper conditioning patterns that were instilled in me through my mom, through, you know, the boomer, like, all of the generational things. Because I'll really ask, and you have to so be honest with yourself, because I got angry at her one day. Like, I was irritated. I mean, I wasn't like yelling or anything, but I was really irritated because she wanted to do something and it was just random as heck. I think it was like, go get ice cream or something. And I was like, you know, you've had sugar today already. Like, we already did this and this. And I really just, like, had to take an honest look. And I was like, why are you so irritated that she's just, like, wanting to do things? And it's because, like, it was one of those things where I had to look, and I was like, well, my mom was always controlling me. Like, I didn't have a say. Like, it was her way or the highway. I'm like, who are you to be like, we're gonna do this randomly? It's like, no, you're a child. And it really makes you, like, question your beliefs. Like, is it so wrong, right? Especially now that I am trying to heal myself and figure out what I want and how to attain it, and how my mind blocks me from it. Like, why is it so wrong for her to just say what she wants
Right.
and to expect that it's going to happen? Like, that's literally what I'm trying to teach myself right now. Like, to know that I can just put the belief in the universe and not have to worry about the how. Like, she's teaching me how to, like, help heal that.
Well, and that's the importance even as adult children. Okay, so I'm talking to the adults here who, you know, you're dealing with your parents, and probably more Gen Xers than younger ones, but um that's the thing is, since we did choose our parents, soul does, and the reason is because we're here to learn certain things, we're here to evolve in a certain way, and so without that we're not going to evolve. So even the nasty sometimes is part of the evolution, just because it is there, and there's no explanation, there's really no explanation for it, but it just is because we need to feel something or experience something, or, and I'm not saying abuse and all that kind of stuff is the victim's issue, but because it's not, but it's one of those things, like sometimes we, you know, like going back to our mental illness episode, we both had to experience parents with mental illness for us to be able to deal with our own mental illness. Because if we would not have seen it so blatantly done wrong, we wouldn't be trying to work so hard to do it right for our kids. And so we have to look at it that way, like with the hugs. I, like, my mom on occasion would hug us, my dad on occasion would hug us. I mean, we always knew we were loved, but it was, you know, the grandpa who hugged me and slipped me $20, or those were the things that I remember, you know, those are the hugs that I remember, because it wasn't the physical thing. And so now that I have a child who every day, very first thing he does when he wakes up, comes into the kitchen and he hugs me. And pretty much every time I walk into a space with him, he hugs me. And sometimes I want to cringe, and I'm like, why do I want to cringe? You know, I mean, I love getting hugs from my husband. Why? What? But to me, it was just this unfamiliar thing. But then I had to realize that's my mama's issue. It ain't mine. You know what I'm saying? That's my conditioning, is not to hug. So that conditioning is not mine. And this is a tool that I wanted to share with our listeners before we end this episode, is that sometimes things we think are ours are not really ours. And we can give that back to human or non-human. So even if they've transitioned, like there were some things I needed to deal with my grandma that I didn't even realize was her issues. And I'm like, yeah, that's yours and you can have it back because I don't want it. And knowing that it was a condition, and a lot of these things weren't even bad. It was just maybe like talking about somebody in a certain way or thinking something in a certain way. And when you realize that it's not you that was conditioned, you were conditioned by somebody else, just give it back to him. Say, I don't want this anymore. If you want to keep that nastiness, then you can have it, but I don't want it. And you can have it gone. Now, will it come back up? Probably yes. Okay. So I'm not going to like completely say that it, poof, it's gone, like you just prayed it away. I'm being sarcastic there, listeners, but you're just not poofing it away. But it's one of those things, when you acknowledge it, the universe is going to acknowledge the fact that you've acknowledged it. Like, this is not mine. I'm working on this. And there'll be things, and this is my trigger child. He'll constantly say things to me, and I have to sit and I have to consciously go, is this mine to hold on to? Or is it something that's been given to me and I don't want it any longer? And if it's not something I want, I get rid of it. I'm like, this is not mine. And I have to consciously think about it when I say certain things or say it in a certain way. And is this me, or is this the conditioning talking? Is this, something that my mom said, or something my grandma said, or something my dad said, or something a preacher said, or something, the school teacher said, or something, a partner I had said, or a girlfriend I had said, whatever. Is this theirs? And if it's not something that I think or believe, then it's not mine to hold on to. And I'll give it, send that energy right back to whoever gave it to me, because I don't want to have that energetic part of my being anymore. And that's so freeing when you realize that you don't have to hold on to all this. I don't have to hold on to my mom's shit. That's her shit to deal with. If she doesn't want to deal with it, that is her choice. It's not mine. But I also, as her daughter and as a practitioner, I have to look and go, you know what? If she doesn't want to deal with it, there's nothing I can do. I can only love her where she is. And if energetically we don't mesh for a while, that's cool. But I still love her anyways. And I have to meet her where she's at, because she can only meet me where I'm at. And so for our listeners, I just want to encourage you, wherever you are in this process, honor the process, because you eventually will get to the other side. It may take you a short period of time, it may take you a long period of time, but you will eventually get to the other side of it if you want to. If you want to stay angry at your mama, you're going to stay angry at your mama. And it's not your mama's fault, because your anger is your own. So now I'm talking as a mama, but that's you. That's on you. If you don't want to reconcile with your parent, that is on you. That, even if they've done something terribly horrible to you, you need to honor you wherever you are. You need to honor your process and wherever you are. And there's some parents that don't deserve you. They're just plain and simple. They just don't.
Absolutely.
Some parents should just not have children, in my opinion, but that's my own opinion. And I probably was one of them. That's the funny thing, as I was probably one of those people. I probably would have done well to not follow the social norms and have my children in my early 20s when I was completely a mess emotionally and mentally. I probably should have been that person who waited till their 30s, where I was emotionally somewhat stable. I had, done some of the things I wanted to do as a young adult, and not gone down the exact same route that everybody told me I should have gone down. I probably was one of those people. Now, am I upset that I had children? No, I love my children to death. But I was probably one of those people who should have told everybody to go fuck off, excuse my language, and I'm not going to follow this because it would have done everybody better in the circumstances. Now, have I worked hard at it? Yes, I worked a hell of a lot hard, but it would probably have been a lot easier if I had done it a little bit differently. You know what I'm saying? But that's all of us, but we have to work from where we are. And that's what I want our listeners to really, really hear from this episode is we all have mommy and daddy issues. We all do. And we're going to have them. Your children are going to have mommy issues with us, at women. We are. Your kids are going to have mommy issues with you. So accept it, figure out which ones you want to have with them and not do the other shit. That's my opinion. Like I'm raising boys now and I raised a daughter. It's very different. Like, how do I want to raise my boys to be men? Well, luckily I have a husband who treats me like I should be treated. Thankfully, I've got one of those. And so they have a good example, but there's still things like, what do I want them to expect from their wives or their partners in the future? Like, what should they expect? If I'm a basket case, then they might get a basket case, and that's sucky, you know? And so, I mean, I think that's the way we have to look at life and look at where we are in the journey and do what feels good for us at that moment in time and honor where we are in the process and honor, this is the other last one, I'm going to shut up. Tell your family that you're dealing with this. Be honest with them. Like when I was really unpacking a lot of my mommy issue, I called my mother and said, hey, I'm dealing with some things and I found out that you were the source of this issue. So I'm probably not going to chat with you quite as frequently. And if we're on the phone and you bring up certain things, I will hang up on you. So don't be like, if you're offended by it, I'm sorry, but I have to do this for me. And there was about a 9-month period of time. Every time I got on the phone with my mother, I hung up on her. And she finally realized that I meant business. Like I was taking care of me. And if she wanted to keep doing the same things and triggering me, I was not going to allow her to do it. And so after that, like after about 9 months, she doesn't even bring up some of that stuff anymore. Like she doesn't try to trigger me because she wanted, just because that was our relationship from the get-go. And she doesn't do that anymore. Like she realized I set the boundary and I wasn't going to deal with that anymore. But I had to also tell my spouse that I was dealing with this and I was going to go through some mood swings and I was going to be mad and I was going to be angry and I was going to be pissed and I was going to go through all of this. And I had to respect my children when they're like, Mom, why are you so mad at Granny or whatever? I had to say, hey, I'm dealing with these things and I have to honor where she is and I have to honor where I'm at. So please make sure that you're also telling the significant people in your life that you are working through these things because you won't always be the most pleasant person going through it. To start.
I love that you bring that piece in, especially because earlier you mentioned that your son, he just breaks right through. Like if you're trying to act like nothing's going on, he just like brick wall smashes through it, just like, no, but you are. And I think that's a really important piece is in this healing process, you have to be okay with taking off the mask and letting people in. Yes, a lot of the work that's going to be done is going to be in solitude. It's going to be up here, reprogramming old beliefs and all of that stuff. But it's going to be frustrating. It's going to be, like you said, you're going to get sad. You're going to have all of these emotions around it. And having someone to even just, right, the vocal cords, the throat area, like it's so powerful. Like when we vocalize what's happening inside, like that's a release of energy. And so having someone who you can take the mask off with during this time, whether it's a friend or a spouse or a coach or whoever, like having someone to really just hold space for you and let you unpack and really take off the mask. Now, don't halfway take it off and show up like, I'm fine, everything's healed now. Like, no, like really do the work. It's so important.
So I think we've talked enough about mommy and daddy
Yeah.
issues for today. So I know like like I'm just thinking like my head is starting to hurt. And I'm going to be honest with our listeners, because when we get into certain things like this, like my head, because I am trying to overthink what I'm trying to say. My head's starting to hurt because that's that mask, because
Yeah.
these are issues you're dealing with. And, my parents might listen to this episode, or my family members might listen to this episode. So, it is what it is, but it's being raw and real with our listeners. And so wherever you are in this process, we want to honor you for that. If you'd like to reach out to one of us and talk about, your human design, your family's human design, or your soul contracts, or your family soul contracts, how that all plays out, make sure that you hit Diamond and I up in the show notes. Our information will be there. And we invite you guys to, wherever you're listening to this, or if you're watching us on YouTube, make sure you smash that subscribe button, share these episodes out with your family and friends. And, always a good review is amazing too. So give us those 5-star reviews. But is there anything else I was going to say? I can't remember, but yeah, there's the whole 3D-ish part of our episode.
I know, right?
I'm like, I totally went into like business mode there. Like, so yeah. So there you go, listeners. There's the business part of this episode. But we appreciate you guys listening to us and letting us share our hearts with you. So we hope that you will join us again for the next episode. And I'm not sure what the topic is yet. I know we have a list of them, and if there's a topic that you would like for us to share more about, then let us know in the comments, because we would definitely like to talk about topics that you guys are experiencing as well. And there will be episodes, I promise you, coming up about what human design is, how it works, what gene keys are, what soul contracts are, and all of the other wonderful tools that we have in our tool belts, because we definitely want to give you guys some tools and resources on how to navigate this process a lot more smoothly. So there you go. Till the next episode, gratitudes and blessings.